Hello and welcome to Bias Busters, presented by B-Block AP Lang. Our job is to show you the bias in the media you see every day. Ready to get started? In today's episode, we're going to talk about the London riots. First, I'm going to discuss the American coverage of the London riots. Is it what Britain would like to hear? Next, we're going to interview expert journalist Will Watson to comment on an article from BBC, an international news source. I think we'll discover that bias is not just a problem on American soil. Finally, Charles Hancock is going to give an overview of the coverage, bias, rhetorical fallacies, and all. Join us as we bust the bias in today's media. The London riots occurred at the beginning of August of this year. The impetus for the riots included underlying class tensions, political instability, and the death of Mark Dugan, who was killed by police officers previous to the riots. CNN and Fox News, both major American news sources, covered the London riots extensively. While many articles tried to present a balanced perspective, offering evidence supporting both the rioters and those affected by the riots, most articles seem swayed towards one side or the other. For example, a CNN article entitled "London's Riots of Opportunity" called the rioters feral rats. However, one of the most prevalent biases apparent in CNN and Fox News' articles was a national bias against Britain. CNN's article, "Britain Riots, a Consequence of Europe's Economic Crisis," does nothing more than blame Prime Minister David Cameron for not addressing the causes of the London riots. Fox's article, "Syria Envoy Draws Parallel with Britain Riots," blames the London riots for similar events occurring in Syria. However, it presents no facts to back up this claim. Overall, it seems if American coverage of the London riots is far from impartial. Next, we have our expert journalist to discuss the international coverage. So, Will Watson, what did you think of BBC's article, "London Riots, Teenagers Lack Hope"?
I believe that this article is not a very accurate portrayal of the events that have occurred in London this past weekend with all of the riots. I believe that this definitely has some class bias against the rioters, describing them as bored teenagers who have nothing better to do, and kind of strikes the emotion by calling them scoundrel who are just lashing out at the officials.
Was there anything that maybe promoted sympathy for the rioters?
I believe so. I think in using the words lack hope, that kind of makes people want to pity the rioters, and as a result, people might look at them saying, we really need to help these impoverished people, this impoverished area, so that they can have the hope that others have.
Were there any other flaws you saw in the writing of this article?
I believe that there were definitely some other flaws. The big one is overgeneralization of the youth in this impoverished area. They just really overgeneralize them by calling them all bored, scoundrel, when not all of them are like that in reality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now for the bias busting of the segment. Now we're going to take one article and expose how the bias in it can mislead you, the reader of the news, into believing something that was not your original idea based on the motivations of the news outlet. For example, we're going to take CNN's "Britain's Riots, a Consequence of Europe's Economic Crisis." This article on the surface seems to take into account the motivations of the rioters: social unrest, hopeless future, careless government. Because of these bad influences, people go to the streets and loot and steal and burn. Under the surface, however, this article doesn't tell us anything we couldn't have figured out by ourselves. This is a clear example of bias towards ease. The article doesn't go into any more depth besides the fact the rioters are in unrest, whatever your interpretation of that word is going to be. Why is their future hopeless? Why do they see the government as not caring about their interests? These questions are never answered, as they are only repeated as their own answers. So, why does the government not care about them? The government doesn't care about them. As if I'm supposed to believe that that's the reason why they're going out in the streets looting, stealing TVs, and burning buildings down. It doesn't even take into account the efforts of the British government to connect with these young people who are obviously disenfranchised with their society. They are trying somewhat. Maybe they're not doing the best that they can. Maybe they can try a little harder, but they're at least making an effort. And that effort should be taken into account in this article. CNN, you've just been busted.
I hope you have seen today that bias is apparent in much of the news coverage of the London riots. American news sources seem biased against Britain, and all of the news sources we watched show bias against London's lower class. I hope you have learned to closely analyze the news you watch. This bias is busted.